There comes a moment when your silence becomes louder than all the words you ever spoke. When your absence starts speaking truths they refused to hear while you were still present. You weren't just another person in their life, you were the anchor, the emotional compass, the quiet strength they leaned on without realizing it. But they mistook your patience for permanence, your kindness for weakness, and your loyalty for something they were entitled to. And when they lost you, they thought they lost control over someone else, but what they truly lost was the very balance that kept their world from collapsing. Because when someone loses the person who kept them grounded, they don't just grieve a relationship, they start unraveling who they thought they were. You were their compass, silently guiding stability. They didn't see it, not in the beginning. To them, your presence was simply part of the background, constant, reliable, undemanding. They never truly noticed how much of their emotional world was structured around your calm, your clarity, your strength. You weren't loud about it. You didn't demand credit. You just held things together because that's who you were. But in every space you entered, you brought order, not with control, but with quiet presence. You were the one who listened when others only spoke, the one who understood when others passed judgment. You provided a grounding force without anyone realizing how much they leaned on it, and that's what made your role invisible until it was gone. Stability isn't dramatic. It doesn't seek attention, but it's the foundation upon which everything else depends, and once that foundation cracks, everything that once felt secure starts to tremble. That's what happened after you began to pull away. It started small, a little more silence, a little more distance, but in that gap, they began to feel the weight of what they took for granted. They didn't recognize how much chaos you kept out of their lives just by being there. You absorbed tension, you brought direction when they were lost, and you gave without demanding repayment. You were the quiet balance between their emotional highs and lows, and when that balance disappeared, so did their sense of control. What they thought was stability in themselves was actually the reflection of the stability you carried. Your presence allowed them to function. You gave them a framework, a kind of emotional map they followed without even realizing it. When they lost you, it was like losing a compass in the middle of a storm, disorienting, confusing, even frightening. You didn't walk away out of bitterness. You withdrew because you realized you were holding up a structure that was never meant to rest entirely on your shoulders. And once you stepped back, the truth surfaced, not just about them, but about how deeply your contribution was woven into their emotional stability. Now they are left with the echo of what you used to provide. And it's not that they can't survive without you, it's that their world feels emptier, less steady, less whole, because you weren't just someone in their life, you were a center point, and without that center, even familiar things feel lost. In time they may rebuild, but it will be different. It won't carry the same calm, the same quiet wisdom you brought. They'll search for it in others. They might try to recreate it in themselves, but something in them knows the way you grounded them wasn't ordinary. You were their compass. You never needed to point out how much you did. Your presence said it all, and when they lost you, they didn't just lose comfort, they lost direction. Familiarity made them blind, absence made them see. There is a strange comfort people find in consistency. When someone is always there, always understanding, always forgiving, always showing up, it creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that their presence is permanent, that no matter what is said or done, they will stay. That comfort becomes complacency, and over time, what was once deeply valued becomes barely acknowledged. You were that constant. You gave without needing attention. You forgave even when it hurt. You listened when no one listened to you. And they began to see all of that as something ordinary, something guaranteed. They stopped saying thank you. They stopped noticing your effort. You became part of the background, appreciated in theory, but forgotten in practice. Familiarity slowly turned your sacrifices into expectations. The more you gave, the more they assumed you always would. They began to act as if your patience had no limits, as if your kindness didn't require care in return. And that's where they started losing you, not when you left, but when they stopped noticing you were still there. But you noticed, you felt the shift, you saw their attention drift, you saw them respond with silence to your pain and with distance to your honesty. And in those quiet moments, you began to understand a painful truth. They weren't truly seeing you anymore. They were seeing a version of you shaped by their comfort. And the real you, the one who felt deeply, who hoped silently, who carried the weight in private, was being overlooked. Then came the moment when you finally stepped back. You didn't shout. You didn't try to prove your worth. You simply removed your presence. You gave them the very thing they acted like they didn't need: distance. And it was in that distance that reality began to speak. Because absence has a way of waking people up. It forces them to sit with silence that used to be filled by your presence. It shows them how cold the room feels when you're no longer in it. It reminds them that you weren't just always there. You were choosing every day to be there, and that choice had value. Suddenly, they noticed the messages weren't coming anymore. The support wasn't being offered. The peace you brought into their chaos was missing, and only then did they begin to understand just how much you meant. Not just in your actions, but in the emotional space you held, the safety, the grounding, the lightness you quietly brought into their heavy world. They didn't lose you in one day. They lost you over time, through every ignored moment, every taken for granted kindness, every time they assumed you'd never walk away. And now, in your absence, they finally see what was always right in front of them. You weren't ordinary. You were the miracle they stopped believing in until you were gone. The cost of losing loyalty is the erosion of the self-loyalty. Is one of those quiet forces that holds people together. It isn't loud, it doesn't seek attention, but it's the reason some relationships last longer than the storms that try to break them. And when someone is truly loyal, they don't just stand by your side in easy times, they walk with you when things fall apart, when your words fail, when your world is unclear. You were that kind of person. You showed up when others stepped away. You stayed when it was uncomfortable. You gave more than what was asked, and it wasn't because you didn't have options. It was because loyalty was a principle, not just a mood, for you. But not everyone understands the value of a loyal heart. Some see it as dependence, some mistake it for naivety, and some believe it will never leave, no matter how many times it's tested. That's where the slow unraveling begins, not because you became less loyal, but because they stopped honoring what your loyalty meant. They thought they had time. They believed that no matter how far they pushed you, you'd return. That no matter how distant they became, you'd close the gap. That no matter how much they took without giving, you'd keep pouring, and for a while you did. But loyalty is not slavery. It's not blind. It's not endless sacrifice without respect. When someone gives you their consistent support, their belief in you, their emotional presence, it's a gift. And when that gift is misused, the damage doesn't just fall on the relationship. It starts chipping away at the person who failed to value it. They didn't realize what they were losing while they still had you. They didn't see that every time they ignored your efforts, every time they dismissed your truth, they were slowly breaking a bond that was holding part of their identity together. Because the moment you left, something shifted in them, not just emotionally, but internally. Without your loyalty anchoring them, they began to feel lost in places they once felt sure. They questioned themselves in ways they never had. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about ego. It was about the hollow feeling that came from losing someone who genuinely believed in them when no one else did. Your presence helped them feel seen. Your belief gave them confidence. Your loyalty made them feel safe even when they couldn't admit it. And once that presence disappeared, so did a part of their own stability. Now they're left facing themselves in a way they never had to before. Because losing a loyal person isn't just about losing love or support, it's about losing the mirror that reflected their better self. They will search for that feeling again, maybe in others, maybe in achievements, but deep down they'll know what they lost wasn't just someone loyal. They lost the one person whose loyalty made them believe in who they were trying to become. Your departure became their mirror sometimes. It takes a person walking away for the truth to finally appear. While you were there, while you stayed, helped, listened, and supported, they never paused to reflect on the role you played in their life. You were always available, always ready to hold space for them, even when they didn't understand the weight you were silently carrying. They didn't realize it, but your presence was doing more than just offering comfort. It was reflecting something deeper back to them. It was giving them a glimpse of their better self. You became a mirror, one that didn't criticize, didn't attack, but quietly held up a vision of who they could be when they were loved, when they were trusted, when they were understood. But mirrors can only show truth to those willing to look, and for a long time they looked everywhere except within. They blamed circumstances, they ran from discomfort, and they assumed your support would always be there to soften the fall, to cover the cracks, to make things easier to avoid. That's why your departure was more than just emotional distance. It was a moment of reckoning. The silence that followed wasn't just about missing your voice. It was about confronting their own, the one they had silenced under the comfort of your presence. The one they hadn't fully developed because they were too used to leaning on you. You didn't walk away in anger. You didn't leave to punish them. You left because the space you held in their life became too heavy to bear alone. You left to protect the parts of yourself that were being drained by constant emotional labor, and in doing so, you did something they didn't expect. You took the mirror with you. Now, they're left with the raw reflection of themselves. No filter, no support, just the truth. They are beginning to see their patterns, the things they ignored, the words they never said, and the growth they avoided. And it's not easy. Because the image they see now is not the one they saw when you were beside them. That's the impact of someone genuine. Their presence doesn't just comfort, it reveals. And when that presence is gone, what's left is not just emptiness, but a deeper awareness of what was lost. They are beginning to understand. You didn't just offer love, you offered clarity. You didn't just provide peace, you revealed where their chaos truly lived. You were a quiet truth in a world full of noise, and now that you're gone, that truth echoes louder than ever. Your departure wasn't their punishment, it was their mirror, and what they see now in the silence, in the stillness, is not just that they lost you, it's that in losing you, they're finally meeting themselves. Your silence became the storm they never expected. Some storms don't come with thunder. They don't arrive with shouting, chaos, or confrontation. Some storms come silently, with absence, with stillness, with the sudden space left by someone who used to be everything. That's what your silence became for them, a storm that didn't scream, but one that changed everything. While you were in their life, you spoke volumes through your actions, you stood by them, you listened when they were overwhelmed. You encouraged them when they doubted themselves. You stayed calm when they brought confusion, and they thought your steadiness was endless. They mistook your softness for silence. They believed your patience meant you didn't notice the imbalance, but you did. You noticed the one-sidedness. You saw how your emotions were often overlooked, how your needs were placed second, how your energy was expected, not appreciated, but instead of arguing, you stayed loyal. Instead of demanding change, you hoped your consistency would inspire reflection. For a long time, you believed love could be a teacher, that presence could heal what distance never could. But sometimes, love also has to let go. When your presence becomes permission for someone to keep ignoring your value, your departure becomes your final truth. That's what happened when you stopped explaining, when you stopped reminding them, when you simply walked away, not to cause pain, but to protect peace. That's when your silence turned into something powerful, not because you wanted revenge, not because you needed them to suffer, but because your absence revealed something their comfort had been hiding, how much of their emotional balance depended on you. Suddenly, they began to feel what they never allowed themselves to see: the empty spaces in conversations, the lack of warmth in their days, the absence of someone who genuinely cared. And in that quiet, they weren't just missing you, they were finally hearing what your words never forced them to face. It wasn't just about losing a relationship. It was about losing the version of themselves that only existed when they were with you, because you didn't just offer love. You offered safety, meaning, and direction, all without needing recognition. Now they're left searching through the silence for the things they once ignored. They replay old conversations. They revisit shared moments. And in all of it, they finally feel the weight of what was lost. Because silence, when it follows sincerity, is never empty. It echoes, it lingers, it teaches. You didn't choose silence to punish. You chose it to heal, and in doing so, your absence became louder than any speech could ever be. It became the storm that awakened them, not to fear but to truth. And that truth is this: when someone loses the person who made their world make sense, they're not just left alone. They're left with themselves.